Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our next session. If everyone can hear me, or if anyone can hear me, if you could just let me know that you are on and can hear, then I will go ahead. Okay, thank you, Julie. So it sounds like you guys can hear me. And so we're going to dive into policies and procedures. And as I mentioned earlier today, um, there's a lot of policies and procedures with all AmeriCorps programs, and all AmeriCorps programs sort of interpret them the same, but they might be a little bit different program to program. So we definitely want to make sure that as an AmeriCorps member, you understand exactly what these policies mean for you, which is why we are taking so much time this afternoon, as well as some time tomorrow, to talk about these things. Um, I would suggest for this afternoon, and also again tomorrow morning, for you guys to pull out your binders right now. And one of the first documents in your binders right after the schedule is going to be your member handbook. And this member handbook is really where all of these documents live. This is where all of the policies are. If you have any questions about anything, this is the document really to rely on to help guide you through the year. We, of course, have a bunch of other documents, and we'll continue to create different helpful guidance documents and whatnot for you throughout the year. But this is really where you should look to as a go-to resource when it comes to AmeriCorps, when it comes to the background of CivicSpark, when it comes to what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis, and what, again, you aren't allowed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. When I can, I have listed the page numbers in this next session, so you can sort of flick back and forth with your documents or with your member handbook, so you can sort of read along. I mentioned earlier, I would definitely suggest just taking time whenever you have a chance to read through this. We'll go through most of the really big points, but again, this next week is going to be packed full of information. And so I'm sure that come December, you might be thinking, oh, what was that policy about reimbursements? Where should I look that up? And that's when it's going to be great to go back and be able to review this information. With that said, I definitely realize that you will have questions on a lot of these things as we go. So today, we are really going to focus on these following areas: the basic policies, the hours, benefits, and then just a few other policies. What I am going to do is I definitely encourage questions throughout the entire session, but I'm also going to take time at the end of each of these four big groups for you guys just to have, 5-minute conversation in each of your regions. Make sure that you ask any questions that you have at that point of time. The regional supervisors know a lot of these answers already, but if there is a question that you want to ask me, this will be a great way for us just to have a dialogue and to make sure that I can address any of these more tricky policy areas. So, with that said, I am going to go ahead and dive right in. And I will be looking at the questions throughout this entire time. So, even if you write something, if it's something I can immediately answer, I'll definitely do so. If it's something that might be better to wait and address at the end of any session, I might do that as well. But regional supervisors, keep the questions coming. So, diving in, I'm going to talk just very, very briefly about basic requirements and background checks. And the reason why I'm going to spend so little time on this is because you guys have a pretty good idea of these at this point of time, as you've already gone through the interview process. You've already had to do the background check. When you look at the basic requirements for AmeriCorps in general, you'll notice that they really are quite basic. You have to be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national or lawful permanent resident. You must be at least 17 years old. You have to be fingerprinted and have that background check. And you have to not have dropped out of school. And typically that means high school in order to serve with AmeriCorps. You might be looking at those and saying, that's not the same qualifications that I noticed in the CivicSpark job application. And that's definitely true. CivicSpark does have additional requirements that include a 4-year graduate degree, education or experience in sustainability, and some level of government interaction. Maybe some of you guys have done some internships with local governments or done some voluntary work in the past with local governments. Those are sort of the basic qualifications that we looked for in our program. But with that said, all of our members definitely fit into the AmeriCorps basic requirements as well, as this is really the focus area. AmeriCorps, I mentioned, it was created in 1994, and it was really created as as a sort of a job training program. And so it was supposed to be a domestic program to prepare US citizens or permanent residents to go out and to get the training, to get the experience that they needed to propel their careers. And that is why there is such a focus on member development. It's also why we only see US citizens or national and lawful permanent residents as the people who can complete this program. Looking at background checks are actually one of the strictest AmeriCorps policies, which is why you have heard so much from both myself and likely your regional supervisors, probably more than once, on how important it is to complete this process. Members can't start recording hours until the background clearance comes in. And I'm going to take just a little bit of time to talk about this because, for the most part, everyone who's been at training today does have their background check clearance in. But with that said, we did encourage a lot of people to come to the orientation, even if maybe we hadn't gotten their clearance completely through. And the reason why this is, and actually just to sort of take a step back, the reason why background checks are so important for AmeriCorps programs is because I would say probably about 75 to 80% of all AmeriCorps programs have to do with education. So it's really a type of program that works with youth. It works with minors, so people under 18 years old, and that's definitely a vulnerable population. And so that is the reason why AmeriCorps in general is so strict on making sure that everyone has had those background checks, state, federal, and the NSOPR. So going back to why this might be relevant for you, for those of you who have completed your background checks, we have been getting results very, very quickly this year. Most background checks, just in general, especially on a federal level, but also in California, we get the results, or I should say, the background checks are cleared the same day or maybe one day after you actually get the checks. Unfortunately, there's often a little delay between the time when the checks are cleared and the time when the FBI and the state gets back to us and lets us know you're cleared. So a lot of these situations where maybe some of you maybe just got printed this past weekend, or maybe today, maybe during lunch you ran out and got your live scan completed. And this is why we encourage you to still be at orientation. This is why we encourage you to really be able to be part of this team atmosphere, because I may not get the final results. I may not actually see the results until Thursday, but on Thursday, those results could come in and they would have said, oh yeah, that member was cleared back on Monday, or they were cleared last Saturday. And so a lot of times these clearances come in sort of retroactively. With that said, as I'm sure those of you who we haven't yet gotten the background check results in from, your regional supervisors have likely told you that you cannot start to log hours until your background checks have been cleared. And this is very true. Unfortunately, we can't have you log any hours until all of the background information has been cleared. And I can tell you, every single one of you have already cleared your NSOPR check, so you don't need to worry about that. It's really the state and FBI check at this point of time. In the case that for some reason, let's say there was a delay in actually getting the results back, or every once in a while a fingerprint might be a little smudged, and so we have to reprint the applicant. if this happens to any of you who we don't have the results in yet, we will definitely work with you to find a way to sort of make up these hours and work with you to ensure that, we can't have you retroactively log these hours, but at the same time, we might say, oh, well, why don't you give us a one-page written summary on what you learned that day? And that might be a way for you to gain hours outside of just your typical hours. So definitely don't worry when it comes to background checks. If you do have any questions, happy to answer them, happy to talk more at length, specifically with any of you. If you're thinking, oh, there might be a special situation with my checks, or I noticed that I did have problems getting, having the print come through. Maybe I'm going to be one of those people who has the smudged prints. Contact me. I'm happy to have these offline conversations with each and every one of you about background checks. Like I said, it's a very strict AmeriCorps policy, but we definitely want you guys to be part of our orientation and to be part of our team in general. Let's see, a little bit more about background checks. I just wanted to mention a few of you, and that we aren't really working with that many schools this year, and so this probably isn't going to be a large percentage of you, but a few agencies sometimes require a second round background check. If you have an agency who, and it could be the local government agency, or again, if you're working with a school, a lot of times that'll be the agency. If you have an agency who says, I need to get you background checked again, you definitely should reach out to me first, because I can provide them documentation that says that you were background checked for us. I cannot share your results, and I would not share your results, but I can give them that type of documentation. Sometimes that works. Sometimes they'll say, well, that's fine. I just need you to get checked again. So do be aware that some agencies might require you to do a second check for your specific project. And this is really especially true for any of you who might have access to children or vulnerable populations. Just for your regular, service projects, if you're not doing that much interaction with minors, you're probably not going to face this at all. And then I just mentioned a few different things about if your live scan results are not yet in. But we can talk offline about that, or if anyone has any questions in just a little bit, we can talk further about that. And actually, let me go ahead and pause now, and this will sort of be our first pause. And I'm not imagining, maybe there will be a lot of questions, but I'm not imagining there'll be too many questions. So I'm just going to give you each a few minutes to check in as a region. To see if there are any questions. Send me any questions that might exist, even if it is sort of a person-specific question. Okay, it didn't look like there were too many questions on that. Again, if any of you members have any specific questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Definitely can talk offline about this. So, switching gears, I'm going to take the next little bit of time to talk about hours. And actually, let me go back here really quickly again, and just look at this breakdown. We have about an hour is going to be my goal to talk about the hours, the benefits, and just a few other policies. And this is because we didn't unfortunately get to watch the AmeriCorps video this morning that I was trying to show everyone. I have sent it to your regional supervisors. So I'm hoping that there might be a possibility to end just a little bit earlier than what we had planned on the schedule so that region to region, you guys can all sit down and watch that video. To the regional supervisors, if you guys have extra computers, it might be worthwhile to try to key it up just because it is a pretty big file. So it might take a little bit of time just to get everything in line. So going back, we're going to talk about the hours for a little bit. Definitely want to talk about all of your different benefits. And this is also a time, I know that I have gotten a lot of questions throughout the day from the regional supervisors and even from some of you guys about, taxes or direct deposit or all of the new hire paperwork that you've been filling out. This is also a time during that benefits section that I really want to answer any questions that may still remain. So we'll take time to sort of pause after talking about benefits to answer any of those questions. And then lastly, I am just going to take a few minutes to talk about these other policies. Disciplinary action, we're actually going to talk mainly about tomorrow. So that'll be, on hold more for tomorrow. The safety plan, and then just a few other policies. These policies that we'll talk about at the very end are really just sort of policies that all AmeriCorps programs have. And as an AmeriCorps program, we fit into this category, but they probably aren't going to be anything that you're really going to be facing on a day-to-day basis like you would with the hours or with your benefits. And so we will spend a little bit less time on those, and I will expect you to just take your own time to read things over in your handbook. Diving into hours, this is going to start, hours has a lot of different components to it, but it's going to start on page 26 in your handbook. And for the most part, I would assume that at this point, you guys know this first point as you did sign your member contract, and this was in your member contract. All the main regulation for all full-time AmeriCorps members, which you are, is to hit a total of 1,700 or more hours by the end of our service year. Our service year technically starts today, so October 20th, 2014, and it goes through September 18th of 2015. We have that amount of time for you to hit those 1,700 hours, which I can tell you is more than enough time to actually get there. We've built out the service year so that you can sort of expect to work 40 hours a week on average, and we'll still have time for holidays, for personal time off, and there's still even a few built-in hours in there just in case, someone has an emergency or something along those lines. I will say, I did mention that the minimum regulation is to hit 1,700 hours. I always encourage all members to actually finish a little bit above 1,700 hours, and that's just so that you have a safety net. This is, it looks like I've lost audio. Can someone let me know when it pops back on, possibly? I am going to just talk to myself until someone lets me know audio is back. It looks like many of you guys have lost audio at this point of time. So I just heard from Jenny that it's back. Okay, perfect. It looks like we are back. So where exactly did I lose off? Should I just start at the beginning of the slide? Okay, so starting at looking at hours in general, I mentioned earlier, you guys all should know some of these different pieces already. Okay. So we got through 40 hours per week. Um, really what we're seeing is that the service year has been built out to be from October 20th until September 18th, working an average of 40 hours a week, plus an additional 13 holidays and 40 hours built in for personal times off. With that said, I did mention it's a minimum regulation to hit 1,700 hours. I actually strongly recommend working a little or aiming to work a little bit over 1,700 hours. And that's just so that you have a little bit of a safety net as you're going through things. It doesn't happen often, but California volunteers in CNCS could look at, timesheets and say, oh, this person forgot to take off lunch on these 2 days. I'm going to take off a half an hour because you have to log out for a half an hour for lunch. I'm going to take off a half an hour here, 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 and here, and here. And then all of a sudden, if you've only worked those 1,700 hours, then you're under 1,700 hours and you wouldn't be eligible for your education award and to be an alum and all of those different things. So that happens, like I said, very, very rarely. But I do always recommend to try to hit closer to, 1,715 hours, 1,720 hours. I'm not asking you to work that much over, but having a little bit there to bank is always a good idea. I did mention that you do have the time off, and that time off is the 40 hours built in for personal time. That's personal time or sick time. And then there's the 13 observed holidays during the year. Sites are required to offer you these days off, but you can choose whether or not you want to work those days. We definitely want you working with your regional supervisors to make sure that they know sort of when you're working and when you aren't working. But let's say an office is open on on a holiday and it's open on Thanksgiving or the Friday after Thanksgiving, and you have a big deliverable coming up and you want to work that day. If someone's in the office and if you can go in there and get work done, then we're not going to tell you you can't do that, but you should know that you don't have to do that. That is a holiday that you have off. So that's just something to keep in mind. In the case that you did, let's say, work on that holiday, you can always take that time off at a later date. And this definitely is another conversation to have with your regional supervisor, because they're not going to approve you to take off a day if it's suddenly extremely busy and there's no capacity to maybe take that vacation day. But we will work with you to sort of comp any extra time that you worked earlier, or on a holiday when you didn't have to work, or let's say there was a very specific event on a Saturday that you had to be to. We would work with you to make sure that you were able to sort of take that time retroactively off. The other thing that brings up is that in some situations, we are able to work with AmeriCorps members who maybe are going to, let's say that you had a vacation planned with your family to go to Europe for 2 weeks in February. We're not going to tell you that you can't do that. We would work with you to bank those hours in advance. So in addition to the 40 hours that you have built in for the personal time off, you would need another 40 hours for that 2 week long trip. So how can we make sure that maybe you're working 45 hours a week during the first 5 weeks so that you can bank those hours so that you can take that time off at a later date? Definitely, these are conversations to be having with your regional supervisors. They're the ones who are going to be approving all of your time. And so we definitely want you, if you have a situation like this, to be letting them know as soon as possible and be having these conversations on a regular basis to make these action plans. So I just talked a lot about sort of banking hours and how comp hours could work if you work extra here and there and whatnot. But I also really want to point out that although you can work to build up time, it is in your contract that members must work through September 18th. So it's not always such a good idea to bank too many hours, because you're going to really sort of have to keep on working even if you complete your 1,700 hours early. As I was saying, I would love it if by September 18th, you guys were all at 710 hours, let's say. but I don't want to see anyone being 1,800 hours because they worked lots and lots and lots. And then all of a sudden they're just sort of working without additional stipend or anything along those lines. So we do want you to be aware, we don't want to by any means overwork you, and we want to keep you busy. So that 40-hour goal is really, really what we aim to see. Again, if you have any questions about time off that you might be thinking about needing to take, or anything that you want to plan for in advance, definitely work with your regional supervisors early on so that we can create an action plan for you. There are also different types of hours. So again, your basic requirement is to hit that 1,700 hours, but there are two main types of hours that you will be completing: service hours and training hours. Training hours are all of the hours that are dedicated to member development. What we were talking about earlier today, we're really devoted to member development, to making sure that you have the proper training that you need, that you can build your networks, that you get all of the soft skills sets that you are going to find helpful throughout the year. That's all of that member development piece. And you can spend up to 20% of your time on these member development hours. And this is really specific to training, such as your monthly trainings or orientation. Later in the year, when you guys are starting to think about interviewing, it might be some member development hours might be used to go on informational interviews or go and do networking different events. Those are all going to sort of be that member development hour. With that said, remember that you'll also be getting a lot of hands-on experience, which is really going to ultimately be a big piece of being able to be marketable after this year. So even though we want you to definitely get in those training hours, understand that a lot of the real experience you'll be getting is during the service hours instead. Service hours are any of the hours that you spend working towards your capacity building projects. And this also includes the time for the volunteer engagement projects. The question you always have to ask yourself when you're recording hours is if an activity is directly related to your project. The training that we're going through right now really isn't directly related to your capacity building project. It's just general training, general orientation. So it would definitely fit into the training hours rather than the service hours. Even during the service year, you might, in November, you will be spending time getting some technical training as well as some project specific training. And so you need to sort of think if the training that you're doing is really a skill or tool that you need for your project, or maybe it's just some other technical training that you really are excited about. Maybe your project is about electric vehicle infrastructure, but you would really like to attend GHG inventory training. That's absolutely fine, but that's definitely a training hour, while any training around the EV readiness project would be a service hour. If the time is something that you've listed as your professional development task you want to work on, that would be more of a training hour. If the time is spent on an activity that is directly related to your project, that would be more of a service hour. I'm going to move forward with hours for a little bit longer. We have a few questions in that I definitely want to answer. I'm just going to get through hours and then we'll stop and talk about those questions as well as any other questions that pop up in the meantime. So looking at logging hours, I mentioned that you're going to be logging your hours as either service hours or training hours. All of your hours will be logged onto Encore. Encore is the tool or online tool that you'll be using for really most reporting, and we'll be taking time on Wednesday to show you that tool. And hopefully by Wednesday, I also will have been able to take time to actually set each and every one of you up so you have a username and a login information at that point of time. So you'll be able to actually go in, hopefully on Wednesday, and backlog the hours that you worked today and tomorrow. And so when you're logging the hours that you will do, you definitely have to log in, log out. So your start and end time. You do have to take a lunch every day. And I should sort of rephrase that, you must log at least a half an hour of lunch every day. I really want you to take that lunch. I want you to have that downtime to be able to get out of the office, maybe to, be healthy and take that time. But even on days where maybe you're doing a working lunch, maybe you're at a conference and you actually have a working lunch, you still need to log out for that half hour. That doesn't mean you're not going to get credit for that half hour. You can just add that half hour back into your work time at the end of the day. Today is a great example of that because you guys did have a 45-minute lunch today. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, 45-minute lunch today. But most of you guys probably spent that as a working lunch. You got to know your teams. You maybe talked about the program, talked about projects, met your teammates, all of those different things. And so you would have to, when you log your hours on Wednesday, you'll have to still log out for that half an hour lunch. But instead of saying that we're ending at 4:15 today, you could just say, oh, we ended at 5 because I'm adding that 45 minutes to the end of the day. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, we can talk about that a little bit more if you have any questions. The next thing that you have to log every time you log is whether or not it's a service hour or a training hour. And then you also have to decide if, as a service hour, if it is prep or actual service. And I'll talk about that in just one moment. The last piece that you need to be logging is whenever possible, you also need to log your beneficiary. And this is true both with training and with service. And your beneficiary is the local government agency that you are working with or that you are helping at that point of time. Some of you have this really easily because if you are one of our embedded members and you're just going to be working out of the same local government the entire year and working on one project, that's simple. You can just put the same beneficiary every single day. Some of you might be working on multiple projects throughout the year. And so maybe during the first 200 hours of your service year, you'll be working with one beneficiary on one project. And then after that, you'll shift and work with another beneficiary on another project. Another group of you guys, the groups who are working a little bit more in the team atmosphere, you may be doing one project, but you'll be impacting a lot of different communities. So we would like you to list which communities you're sort of working towards that impact with. Sometimes, especially at the beginning of the year or anytime you're working with maybe document development or anything along those lines, you're going to be impacting all of those beneficiaries. So you're going to have to list multiple beneficiaries. Other times you might be doing outreach in one specific community. And so in that case, you would just list that one specific beneficiary. Again, this will be something I think that will become a little bit more clear as you all learn more about your projects. And as you all sort of start the work, you'll see when you're working with what beneficiary. So looking a little bit more on tracking the prep versus service. And this is just to give you a little bit more of a breakdown. All service projects will require some sort of ramp up and likely some sort of follow up or ramp down or cleanup time at the end of the year. So you'll have a period of time probably at the beginning of the year as well as at the end of the year, and probably maybe some additional possible training throughout the project. All of these projects or all of these types of hours or these types of tasks are sort of prep hours. They're working towards your project, but they're not working directly on your project. Again, just pulling out an example, if you are working to update a greenhouse gas inventory, you might need to spend 2 weeks before the start of the project really learning the tool that you're going to be utilizing to monitor the results, to gather the data, all of those different pieces. You might be reading some different documents, completing your training, your more technical training, really getting to know the software that you're using. All of that is directly related to your project, but it's sort of ramp up. It's not exactly going out there and doing your project. So that would be a prep hour. Let's say you then start your project and about 3/4 of the way through, you think, I'm not really sure. I know I was supposed to be doing this one thing with the tool, but I wasn't going to get to it until halfway through. And now I'm at that point. Maybe I should take a week off to reacclimate myself with this exact project or with this exact tool. And so again, you're reading over documents, you're getting to know the software, you're understanding the components that you need to know, or you're building new skill sets so that you can utilize them with that project. Again, directly related to your project, but not actually out there doing the project. That is going to be a prep hour again. And then at the end, you might feel like you need to do a little bit of cleanup, or let's say we are running a little bit over on the hours that we allocated to your project, or we're running a little under, excuse me, on the hours that were allocated to your project. We always can use some prep time there as well. So really, you're going to look at your activity on a regular basis, and service is by far going to be the activity that you're doing most often. But there is going to be a little bit of prep time throughout your project, especially at the beginning and the end of the project. That will be service, but be prep time. And then there's also going to be the training hours. And it looks like I might have lost audio. Can you guys hear me at this point? Okay. We are back. Perfect. So hopefully you guys were able to hear most of that, and you were able to sort of take time while I wasn't speaking to talk of, or to look and read through the prep versus the project versus the training. For the most part, service hours are what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. There will be some prep for every project, so there will be some prep hours, and then up to 20% of your total 1,700 hours can be used on training hours. Really quickly, I think we have one more slide on hours, and then I'm going to pause and give everyone a little bit of time to sort of digest this as a region and ask any questions. Just some other hour information. Members can record jury duty. Those are going to be basic service hours. They don't have a beneficiary in that case. There is information, and maternity and paternity leave is actually a little bit more of the benefits, but there is maternity and paternity leave that is available. And then makeup hours. And makeup hours are really an opportunity to catch up on hours if, let's say, you've been sick for an extended period of time and you're just getting back into the office and needing to work that time. Those makeup hours, we want to use most of the makeup hours on your own projects, if possible. And we have lost audio again. Is audio back at this point of time? Can you guys hear me now? Okay, perfect. So hopefully you guys got to read through this again. When audio decides to be not very helpful to us and go out, just take time to read the slide to each other. Hopefully that'll help, and that way we won't get too behind in our timing for the rest of the day. Really, the only thing that I was mentioning is that if you do need to make up hours, let's say that you're sick for an extended period of time, we do want you to focus first and foremost on your service project. But some of you might be in a situation where you can't work extra hours on your service project, you can't work off hours, you can't work from home, you can't do all of these different things. And so in that case, maybe we would focus on professional development or other service projects. I am going to answer just a few questions before I break, and then we're going to take just a few minutes break so you guys can digest sort of all of the hour information to your, or within your own regions, and then we'll jump back in again. So I'll give you guys maybe about 3 or 4 minutes. Definitely type in any of those questions that you have. If I am sick, can I work from home and have those hours count? I'm going to say no. And we are AmeriCorps is, again, fairly strict on not allowing anyone to work from home. You do need to sort of be in an office or be in some sort of supervised situation. We do make some um, we are somewhat flexible to this in cases where, let's say, it is an extended sickness or someone is going to go on vacation for a month, and we need to make sure that they're still logging hours during that time. In that case, we would work with the member, the regional supervisor, and Kif and myself would work with the member to make very clear guidelines as to what they should be working on in an understandable of what the in deliverables were. If they were able to, agree to those and go and work on their own time and turn in those deliverables at the end of, let's say, the week illness, then we would be able to log those hours for them. If it's just I'm sick one day and I can't do anything, we'd really suggest not doing that. But that's, again, in some cases, it might be right up to a deadline and you sort of feel like you need to. We can sort of be flexible about that, but the general rule is don't do that. Is there listed the 13 holidays? And the answer is yes, definitely. I thought that that was one of the documents that was in your hand, or not in your handbook, but in your binder in general. If it is not there, then I can send that out to you. It's going to be all of the major holidays, all of the sort of federally celebrated holidays. You do get 2 days off around Thanksgiving. You get, I think, 3 days off. I think that it is Christmas Eve, Christmas, and the day after that, and then New Year's Eve and New Year's Day off. With that said, I do realize that some of you will be working out of local government offices where they will be taking longer holidays. So again, that might be a time where we can set up some list of deliverables that you can work on offline, and therefore you can take off that extended period of time but still log some hours. And it looks like it's not in the member handbook, so I will get you guys a list of these different holidays, and I apologize for that. One of the other things that I will say is that we do say that we have 13 holidays, but with that said, 2 of those holidays are actually service days, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I actually think that I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, but it might be later today. Ugh, and audio is gone again, I think. Okay, I might be back now. I apologize. I don't know what's going on, but something is getting fuzzy and our audio just keeps on dropping. I will send you guys the list of holidays. We'll talk more about service days in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pause now and um, let you guys talk amongst your team and ask any questions that you do have. I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes, like I said, and then we'll get back into things.
Okay, we are back in here. And is this audio a little bit better, and can everyone hear me at this point of time? Okay, excellent. Hopefully, I called in, so hopefully we will be having fewer audio problems for the rest of the day. Again, I apologize that this is not going well for this afternoon session. You actually didn't really have that many questions about hours. Hopefully this will be something that we can go into more sort of as you start to log more hours and as you actually start to work some different things. The one thing Larry did ask in the North Coast, are there going to be any group webinar trainings during the year for professional development? Definitely. We are looking at having a few different types of webinars. We would love to be able to provide some technical knowledge and technical resources, especially if, let's say, there is a new state tool that's released. We would have a webinar to sort of teach everyone on that. In addition to that, we realize that some of our regional supervisors have amazing skill sets in lots of different areas. So we might have webinars that are actually put on by our regional supervisors that can be accessed by other regions as well about a very specific skill or tool or something along those lines. And again, this is your guys' professional development. So if there is something that we hear a lot of you are really passionate about, we would work as an organization to put together a training that might sort of fit that area for you. Going to move on now, and we're going to talk, we talked about displacement earlier, so I'm actually not going to touch on that so much right now. Hopefully you have a good idea after doing your activity this morning as to sort of how you should be alert to what you can do and what you can't do. And your regional supervisors and myself, always a resource for you. So if you ever feel like you're being put into a position where you're like, I'm not sure I should be working on this, just let us know. We're happy to talk you through it. We're going to dive in now to AmeriCorps benefits, looking at the stipend, food stamps, education award, forbearance, loan forbearance, health benefits, and child care. And again, I am happy to answer any questions as they come up. If they're quick answers, if they do need something a little bit more lengthy, we'll try to get to the end of this session and then give you guys a little bit of time within as a region to come up with questions and maybe answer them yourselves. This is also the time, if you have any questions sort of about taxes and whatnot, please ask those questions at this point of time. Diving in, looking at stipends, members, you all receive a total of $14,000 per service year, which ends up being $583 $583.33 per paycheck. And really the important thing to note here is that your paycheck is the same regardless of how many hours that you worked. As long as you log 1 hour during the pay period, you will get your stipend check. This is important if, again, let's say you have an extended sickness or something along those lines, you're going to get paid the same as long as you go into work one day. It's also important to note that, this is another reason not to wear yourself out at the beginning of the year or during the year working, 60 hours one week, because you're really going to get paid the same no matter what. So just be aware of that. This is completely dependent. The $14,000 is just split over the amount of pay periods that you have throughout the entire year. We'll have 24 paychecks, and so it's just that $14,000 divided by 24. Your first paycheck will be November 7th. Your last paycheck is September 25th, 2015, and now things are going crazy. The one thing that I mentioned to most of you guys as I was getting you your new hire paperwork is that I strongly suggest direct deposit. And that's just so that you know when your paycheck is coming. Since we are a state program, the paychecks are going to be cut up here in Sacramento and then have to be mailed to you. So if you do sort of take out that mailing piece, you'll know exactly when you get your paycheck and you will get it on time and not have to wait for the mail to show up. We do get paid bi-weekly, so that means that starting on November 7th, every other Friday is when you'll get paid. That's just sort of how you can expect your living stipend to come out there. Now, the great thing about being a state and national program is that all state and national AmeriCorps programs basically have a caveat that says that the living stipend cannot be taken into consideration when you're looking at other social services. And the social service that this sort of comes into play the most and that people usually utilize it for is for food stamps. I sent each of you guys information about your personal documents for applying to the SNAP program, the food stamp program in California earlier this afternoon. So that should be in your inbox right now. If someone did not receive them or if you have any questions about them, definitely feel free to connect with me. Happy to answer any questions. Food stamps are something that federally AmeriCorps actually expects all of their state and national members to take advantage of. And that is one of the reasons why the stipend is as modest as it is, because they are expecting AmeriCorps members to have that sort of supplement of their income in the food stamp program. Just a few things to note, and I think that this next slide might be a better slide. This is the website that you will be filling up or signing up for the food stamps on. And I did send that in the email that's in your inbox right now. That, for the most part in California, can now be all done online. There are certain counties that still don't allow online services for one reason or another, but for the most part, you can at least start the process online. You will need these following documents, citizenship and identity, letter from CivicSpark stating your income and service term. That's what I got to you today, as well as an additional letter that reminds them of the policy when it comes to AmeriCorps stipends not being taken into consideration. You do have to provide a bank statement, as well as any sort of utility documents. And utilities are actually really good documents to have because they can not only prove your bills, but they also can prove your residency, which is the last piece that you have to show. If you do apply for all of these pieces online, they will typically set up an appointment for you, and you'll just have to come in, provide them with all of those documents, and typically it's even sort of quick on being able to get the access right away. If you're not online, you would just have to stop by the social service office with this information, and if there was maybe an online application that you could start, you could go with that information and then you'd be ready to go. A few different things to mention about food stamps in general. First off, if you are in a situation where you are living with your parents, that's definitely a situation, as long as you are being claimed as a dependent, that you are still eligible for food stamps. So just because you might not be living in an apartment of your own, that doesn't mean that it takes you out of eligibility. That would just be something you would need to double check, am I really a dependent or am I not a dependent of my parents? And if you weren't, then you would be eligible. The other piece to know is, and this is true if you are living with your parents, or maybe you're living with friends and you don't have a lease, or maybe you're living with a significant other. If you don't actually have a lease, or if you are not paying sort of rent when it comes to paying it directly to the landlord, it's still very good to provide some sort of letter that states that you are, living in this house and you are expected to contribute to the household in these different ways. That letter can be from your parents, it can be from your friend that you're living with, it can sort of be from anyone, as long as it details, blank is living with me. I require a $300 rent on a monthly basis. She also has to pay for our bills, this bill and this bill and this bill, for a total of approximately X per month. That type of thing is what they want to see when you're applying for SNAP. It shows how much you owe, which gives them a better idea of how much you might be eligible for. If you do have a lot of savings in any one bank account, I would recommend, when you go to fill out your SNAP information and you're giving them your bank account, to not give them the account, or to move that money for just a period of time. And this is because assets are taken into consideration when they start to think about how much they're going to give you on a monthly basis. And so if you do have, large assets set aside, and that is in an account that they can see, that might limit the amount that you'd be eligible for on a monthly basis. So just something to consider as you're sort of doing things. By no means am I telling you to try to cheat the system or anything along those lines. I just want you to be aware of some of these different pieces when you go to apply. The other thing that I am going to note is that you can log up to 8 hours of your time spent applying to SNAP as a training hour. So this is definitely true if you need to stop by the social service office, if you have an appointment, any of those different things. You can log those hours up to 8 hours, just log them as training hours. Moving on, Civil Education Award. This is really one of the best things that I think AmeriCorps comes to when it comes to benefits. And this was really from the GI Bill in the 1940s, which serves as a model for this bill. And the idea behind the GI Bill was really in return for exceptional service from citizens, the nation invests in higher education. So the Siegel Education Award will be 5,645 hours. Members will be eligible for this at the completion of their 1,700 hours. And it can be used to pay for qualifying student loans or to go back to school, to pay for the cost of attending an institution. It does have to be a Title IV institution, which isn't any accredited institution, so you can't go back to a school that isn't an accredited program. There's definitely some flexibility as to what the award can cover and how you can sort of pay for things. That's something that's definitely a conversation that we should have closer to the end of the year, but I do want to let you know, there is a little bit of flexibility in sort of paying off those loans and doing different things along those lines. We'll also talk a lot more closer to the end of the year about, how to make sure that you're getting the most out of it as the education award and any interest that's being paid off on student loans is taxable. So definitely I will give you those tips when it's a little bit closer to actually being able to use them. Again, looking at the Siegel Education Award, I mentioned that you are only eligible for it at the end of the 1,700 hours, and that is very important to note because if you do decide to leave the program for any reason that's not a compelling need, then you basically forfeit your award. And so we are very clear that if a member leaves early for compelling need, they can receive a prorated award. And a compelling need really is any illness, any sort of death, which we wouldn't want anyways. It could be, though, an illness of a close family member who you need to leave to go support. That's the type of compelling need that we would say, okay, it's out of your control, and therefore we can apply to have you get a prorated education award. If you ever fall into this situation, if you're needing to leave the program because of a compelling need, that is your responsibility to let us know, and then we would start moving you through that process. Ultimately, it is not up to us. It's up to, we submit the information to CNCS, and they make the final decision. But this is something that we really want to help you get all the pieces in place to submit that information so that we can get you to at least get a prorated education award if that's something that you do deserve. And then myamericorps.gov. This is in here because this is a website that you will all need to go to probably close to the beginning of November. Once you are fully enrolled in the AmeriCorps program, you will have access to myamericorps.gov, or excuse me, my.americorps.gov. And this is where you can access your education award eventually. That's where you'll actually be able to distribute it. So you'll be able to say, oh, I want it to go to this loan, this amount to this loan, and then this amount to this school, and all of those different pieces. This is going to be very important because this is how the National Trust, and the National Trust was created again in 1993. That is really the creation of the funds that fund AmeriCorps, and also that is where the funds for your Siegel Education Award come from. And so this links, my.americorps.gov, links you up with the National Trust fund, and then that's where they get the information and then can send out your allocated money in whatever way that you're asking for. I'm going to say please take time prior to November 1st, or excuse me, I did mention it'll probably be just around November 1st when you'll be able to create an account. So this is maybe take time prior to December 1st to create an account and really make sure that you keep that information. It's also important because you can apply for loan forbearance on your account here. And so this might be something when you really want that as soon as possible so that you can put in your loan forbearance information. Just try to remember your password because you really won't be using this account that often throughout the service year. But unfortunately, my.americorps.gov is not something I can help you with. So if you lose your password or if you have any problems you have to call the help desk, and I can't help you with it. So make sure you write down your password. Important information just in general. Again, everyone has to be enrolled, fully enrolled within 30 days of today. My guess is most of you will be enrolled within 2 weeks of today. That's when you'll be able to start logging into my.americorps.gov and doing all of these different processes. Talking a little bit then about loan forbearance. All federal and approved loans can go into forbearance during the term of your service year. And forbearance is a lot like deferment. It basically means that you do not have to make any payments on your loans. Your loans will continue to accrue interest, but at the end of the year, you just fill out a sheet and apply for AmeriCorps to pay off all of the accrued interest. And they will do so. You just sort of need to fill out that form. There are a few different things about this. The first thing is you can wait until your my.americorps.gov account is available, and you can actually apply for forbearance on that website. But additionally, there is a paper form you can fill out. You would have to fill it out, send it to me, I sign it, and then I send it to your lender. Either way, we can do, whatever you're more comfortable with for sure, but either way, I definitely recommend taking time just in the next few weeks to call your lender and check in with them and say, I am now an AmeriCorps member. I am planning on putting my loans in forbearance. I'm sending you the final paperwork. I was wondering if there's anything else you need from me. And this is important for two reasons. The first reason is most lenders, if you call them and you say, I'm an AmeriCorps member and I'm sending you my paperwork, they will say, oh my gosh, that's great. Let me go ahead and put a hold on your loans right now. And if you do that soon enough, that might mean that you don't have to pay a payment that you would have otherwise had to wait until that paperwork got to them for. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is because there are some lenders who are a little more finicky about these things, and they will say, oh, that's great. I'm glad that you're filling out the form that AmeriCorps provides you. I also need you to fill out these 3 forms. And then they'll have to send you the forms, and you'll have to do that and take care of all of those different pieces. It's typically not difficult, but it can be that much more time consuming. And if you are on schedule to pay loans, that could be another month that you have to pay your loan for. So definitely take time in the next few weeks to call your lenders, check in with them, and see what is necessary. Something up to health insurance. You guys have in your packet where it was your AmeriCorps benefits health insurance application. The next 4 pages or so is all of the coverage with the plan that we offer. We do just offer the AmeriCorps benefits plan, but in addition to that, LGC wanted to offer something a little bit more because these are bare minimum coverage. And so we do also have you in an accidental plan, or like an additional accidental plan. And really what that says, it just ups your coverage. So instead of, let's say, being eligible for coverage of $1,000 for an ambulance visit, you're really eligible for $2,000. I'm making up these numbers. They are not right at all, but that's what the difference is and why there's sort of the 2 different pieces there. What I will say is that our coverage is fine, and if you are not someone who, typically goes to the doctor very often and you just sort of want that bare bone coverage, our coverage will do. It will start November 1st and it will end at the end of September of 2015. If you are covered through another source, and if it is at a very low cost to you, it might be worthwhile to stay on that coverage instead of our coverage. It's really a decision that you have to make. Ours sort of does the basic coverages, but if you want something more, there is better out there. So that's what I will say about our health insurance in general. And if there are any specific questions, this is the first time that we've used this health insurance, obviously, as we are a new AmeriCorps program. And so if you do have any questions, I may not be able to answer them, but I'm happy to forward them on to our provider and get those questions answered for you. So if anyone does have questions about this, let me know. I'm happy to follow up about that. And then the last benefit that, oh, no, two more benefits. One of the benefits I want to talk about really quickly is childcare. And again, I'm just going to say when it comes to childcare, please let me know if you need access to childcare. I can provide you the information you'll need to move forward to apply, but this isn't something that's actually run by LGC, but it is run by AmeriCorps, and it's actually run through the Child Care Development Block Grant, which is a federal program. And so it's something that you would really sort of have to work with them to go through the process rather than, something that I have direct say over. I'm happy to help walk you through that process. It definitely is worthwhile. If you do need child care, reimbursement can be up to 100% of current market rates, which typically doesn't cover everything, but it would cover a significant amount. So, it's definitely something to consider if you do need child care. Just touch base with me, and I'm happy to provide more information and walk you through that process. So now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the mileage, public transportation, and parking reimbursement. And what I am going to say here is that members can be reimbursed for transportational expenses that are required for work. We cannot cover expenses if it is just commuting from your house to the office. That's, a basic expense that we do not cover. But if you had to go into the office and then had a meeting 20 miles away for your project, we would be able to cover that cost from the office to that meeting and back. I will also say that there is a limited budget for this. Each region has their own budget, and for the most part, when it comes to any transportation expenses required for work, we'll be able to cover that. When it comes to any additional carpooling reimbursements or reimbursements for monthly training travel, that's something that we can try to cover, but again, there is a limited budget and there might not always be a budget for this. We will, again, try to reimburse, and when it comes to transportation to monthly trainings, for the most part, we can only reimburse for carpooling. But we understand that there are some embedded members out there who do have to travel a little bit further just to get to their training days. And so in that case, carpooling might not be possible. We would work with those embedded members to, prioritize them when it came to that limited budget. Members will have to complete the reimbursement form. You guys have all seen that reimbursement form because hopefully you completed it for your live scan paperwork today. You'll have to either keep receipts or track your vehicle miles traveled, and you'll need to submit it on a monthly basis to your regional supervisor. Regional supervisors will review and approve and then send up to me, and then we will approve them and get those checks out. So again, we want to be able to make sure that we have enough funding to really take care of all required for work expenses, and if there is additional funding outside of that, then we'll definitely work with those of you who maybe are traveling a little bit further for those monthly trainings. And that includes this orientation week. Sorry about that. I should have mentioned that earlier. This is sort of the monthly training travel. So for those of you who are carpooling to orientation, or maybe those embedded members, we'll work with you to make sure that this is counted within that pool as well. So again, that'll be something you keep track of, all of the vehicle miles traveled, submit your invoice or your reimbursement form to your RS at the end of this month, and then they will get it up to us. Okay, I'm going to pause. In this last section, I will only be taking a few minutes on. So what I want to do is, again, give you guys about 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes within your region to think about those benefits, to ask any questions that you have to your regional supervisors. Regional supervisors, please feel free to shoot any additional questions to me. I will come back in about 3 or 4 minutes, answer any questions that came my way, and then it should only take us maybe 3 or 4 minutes to get through the rest of the material. Ready, set, go. Okay, I am going to come back here and answer a few questions that have been brought up, and I guess let me start out by sort of clarifying something that I said earlier, and that was regarding embedded members and them sort of being preferred when it comes to cost or reimbursement to travel for monthly orientations. And really what I should have said there is if the embedded member is having to travel a further distance, and by a considerably further distance, those would be the ones that would be preferred in all of the costs that we have to look at when we're thinking of reimbursement. And this is especially true, you know, we have in the LA region, we have someone who's up in Ventura. That's going to be a situation where it is definitely sort of out of the way to get to a training event. And so that's the type of embedded member who I'm talking about, not just someone who in LA, there's going to be lots of embedded members sort of all over LA. That's just sort of where their offices are, rather than someone who is really considerably out of the way when it comes to the region. So hopefully that might clarify a little bit. If their commute is to work is equivalent to the commute to orientation, then we're not really going to preference them, and that's a situation where hopefully they would be carpooling anyways, but if it's longer, then that would be a situation where they would. And let's see, a few other questions that I had. Rob, you asked, do members qualify for any other allowances such as utility cost reductions? Yes, definitely. And this is something that you guys should be looking into region by region, and also something that possibly if you have any AmeriCorps alums come in and speak, and I don't know if R2 alums will speak about this on Wednesday morning when we do have the Survival as an AmeriCorps member session, but that's something that a lot of other people in your region can sort of tell you which areas you should look for. But there are definitely some other sort of low-cost things that people could qualify for. Another big area where you might want to look at this is public transportation. There's a lot of public transportation. I know that Muni, for example in San Francisco has a low-income discount, and so that's another area where you can really sort of save money. Another question, going back to another benefit of the Siegel Education Award, is looking at if there are other additional education awards or scholarships available for AmeriCorps alum. And I know that I talked to a lot of the AmeriCorps members who, you know, a lot of you guys throughout the interview process about this. There are a lot of options out there for you. If you are looking at using your education award to go back to school, I definitely recommend taking time to look at the universities that match your award, because there are quite a few universities in the United States now who will match your award. So really you're getting, you know, $11,000 plus from that $5,645 award. So that's a great way just to sort of get that additional money. Additionally, there are quite a few universities that give specific scholarships for AmeriCorps alum. I can tell you my my graduate program gave one full ride scholarship every year for an AmeriCorps alum. So definitely a great way to sort of save money when it goes to, or when it comes to going back to school. For the Siegel Education Award, what if you don't have loans to pay on? So that is what I'm talking about. Using it to go back to school is a great way to do anything. That's also the area where I was mentioning there is a little bit of flexibility. And so I do know AmeriCorps members who maybe already completed their graduate degree and didn't have any loans, and they're like, well, what am I going to do with this? They were able to enroll in different classes that were not working towards any specific degree. For example, I've had AmeriCorps members who enrolled in language courses just because they wanted to learn a new language. Or I had one AmeriCorps alum who actually enrolled in a photography course just because that was something that was of interest, and ended up using the Education Award to buy a new camera, a really nice digital camera. Same thing, sometimes you can work with a school to sign up for a course and say, well, I'm going to allocate, this amount of my education award to you, and they will give some of that back to you, and then you can use it to go get a new computer or go get textbooks or something along those lines. So definitely there is some flexibility in what it can be used for. You also have 7 years to use it. So if you're thinking, well, I might go back to school eventually, but I don't know, you can hold on to it. Not a big deal. So definitely some options there. And then I want to say there was one last question just about transportation reimbursement, and that was regarding public transportation. If you are asking to be reimbursed for public transportation, let's say again you have a work meeting, it's 20 miles away, you end up taking BART to that meeting, and you could keep a receipt for the fee of your BART ticket, and that's what you would submit to me. So hopefully that sort of clarifies any questions there. And sorry, I'm using a lot of San Francisco specific examples because that's where our last AmeriCorps program was, and that's where I live. So, okay, so jumping in, we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about this conduct expectations in the few sort of specific policies that I need to go over with you just as AmeriCorps policies, and then we will break for the day so you guys can get any last information from your regional supervisors, and hopefully you will have time to also watch that video that we had for you. I will be on the webinar still, and definitely for the regional supervisors, I'll be on GChat for a while. So if any other questions come up sort of after the fact, don't hesitate to contact me. Happy to answer anything. Diving into conduct expectations. I'm going to review this really, really quickly because, again, tomorrow, as I mentioned, we do have policies and procedures part 2, and we're really going to be spending most of that time talking about expectation and professionalism during that. So conduct expectations, really, we expect you to remain professional at all points of time. We are focused on the communities that we serve. That's why we're all actually here, is because we want to improve these communities, and we want to help them make an impact and make a difference when it comes to climate change. So it's just important to remember that we're here for them, and it's important to remain honest, patient, accountable, and devoted to working with them and working with your team members at all points of time. That's really sort of the obvious. You guys wouldn't be here if you weren't already focused on these things. We just want to make a clear reminder of that. I also want to let you know that if you're ever feeling that someone in the program isn't abiding by these standards, let us know. We definitely want to create an environment where we welcome your feedback at all point of time. And that's all the way up, the chain. KISS wants to hear from you. And you heard this morning about, or from both Ken and Karen, that they said, if you have any questions, we're happy to be here as a resource as well. Come to us. We are the ones who can sort of make a difference right away, but know that you do have a support system there. And so if you do feel like you have any questions, or if you need a little bit more support, or if you want to talk to anyone, go to your regional supervisor, call me up. I'm happy to talk to you about any of these things, and happy to make sure that you're feeling supported throughout the year. So really quickly, again, I'm going to just point these out, and this is really, as an AmeriCorps program, we have an expectation and we have a goal to set up a system where you feel supported in a safe environment, and we do that by following these policies. Violence and weapons. Cannot possess them, cannot distribute them. Same with drugs and alcohol. Criminal drug convictions. If you are convicted of a drug charge during the service year, you must inform me within 5 days. And that's really true of any felony. If you are convicted of any felony during the service year, you need to let me know, and that there is a 5-day limit. So I don't know why they picked 5 days, but that's what it is. Again, same thing with drugs and alcohol. This is it is our policy to maintain a drug-free workplace that also goes with tobacco-free. smoking is definitely not allowed in the LGC office, and I can basically guarantee it is not allowed in any office that you're going to be working in during the year. What I would say is if you do smoke, check with check the policies of the office that you'll be working with. They may have specific policies, they may have guidelines as to, where there is a smoking area outside, all of those different pieces. So just check in with them, and they're going to be happy to provide that information. Of course, non-discrimination. We want you to review really sort of all of these pieces. This is something for you to review in your handbook when you do have a little bit of time, but just know, we are dedicated to creating an environment where there is non-discrimination, where we are going to have an environment where you're not going to have to deal with sexual harassment, where there is no drug or weapon or any of those issues. So just know that that's the type of environment that we want to create for you, and if you ever have any questions about any of these, let me know. The other two pieces that I'll mention just right here at the bottom, the fractionization in minor age children. I mentioned earlier, AmeriCorps programs by and large are often education-based programs. And so AmeriCorps has a few rules that you'll read about in your member handbook that you'll be thinking, how does this apply to me? And it probably doesn't, because you probably won't be working with minors, but it does apply to AmeriCorps in general. And so they do require us to add some things about, you cannot hang out with minors during or not during your hour time. You cannot, drive around in a car alone with them, any of those other things. The other piece about this is that members should remember to maintain professional relationships with supervisors and coworkers. There's this whole fraternization piece, which again doesn't apply quite so much to us because we're not working with minors, but it is one of those things where we just want to remind you, be professional in all situations. I am happy to answer any questions about those pieces. I would also recommend, if you're really bored one day, just read those sections in your handbook. They are going to basically say what you expect them to say in any work environment, but we did want to go over those really quickly. So that's all I will be talking about for today. Again, I will take some time to answer questions now, and then tomorrow we'll continue this discussion with the expectations, reporting, and then the disciplinary process. Hopefully tomorrow I will get through this really quickly, and so you won't be required to spend quite so much time listening to all of these policies and procedures. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself at this point of time. Regional supervisors, if there are any questions, please let me know. If you do have internet access, I did send you guys the link to the video. It would be great if everyone could watch it. And in the meantime, thank you guys so much for coming to the first day of orientation. We are thrilled to have you here again. We are excited to see what happens this year. And hopefully today was the start of a really fun experience for all of you guys.